Good afternoon. We're going to get started. We're going to talk about what makes up smart water and smart power, where the gaps and opportunities exist in those elements, why you should be including them. Some of the government agencies have very strong words to say about whether or not these things get included. We're going to set that aside. So all you Californians, just sit and relax. We know you have to put this in as a standard. It's okay. We're going to talk to everybody else as well about why they might actually consider putting these things in as standard and how to make money, even if you have to put it in as a standard, make money on the options and the add-ons and the other elements that you may not have to put in as a standard, but how you can turn what right now may feel like a cost center to you into a profit center. And so with that, I've got my trusty clicker here, and we're going to introduce our panel. So I'd like to welcome, we've got a great bunch. Some of them have done this with me before, and they were brave enough to come back again. On my right here is John Fosh, and I'm going to let John talk about Buffington.
We are a production, we call it personalized production, high volume luxury home builder in Northwest Arkansas. We build about 250 homes a year currently. We're growing rapidly, getting ready to expand out of Northwest Arkansas. We'd like to stay on the leading edge. We try to be the leader in our market in doing things. Living in Northwest Arkansas, because of Walmart, we have a lot of move-ins from all over the world, so we see a lot, more demand for some of the things that California and New York, because we have people moving in from there, so we have to try to keep up with those trends, and this is part of it. So that's basically what we do and who we are.
Great, thank you. And we have Ann Ferguson from NOMO. We're going to let Ann, please introduce yourself, tell the folks.
Thank you, very happy to be here. So I'm with NOMO, which stands for No Missed Opportunity. We are a sales enablement technology company that really started in the solar space. The idea being to bring together what was sort of the wild, wild west of solar into a singular platform, allowing our partners to deliver an outstanding consumer experience in getting the customer's home ready for solar, for upgrades to EV and to battery as well. So we've been working with builders almost since our inception and have some great opportunities for builders to help get the home preset, if you will, for those services. So if you wanted to be able to do those services during the build, if you wanted to put solar panels on during the build, great. Many of you do not, and that's understandable, but we strongly encourage, and one of the things we'll talk about is how you can easily get the home ready to accept those things post-close and then potentially make some money off of that as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Aaron Guten from Savant. Aaron?
Hi, everybody. I'm Aaron from Savant. We're a luxury home automation system platform that has, over the last 10 years, built an entirely automated power solution, and that's why we're here today.
Short and sweet, okay. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about purpose and flow. Again, you guys have seen these slides before. You know how this works. These are all the concepts that we're going to cover and we're going to talk about. You will notice I didn't have to interrupt for our sponsor. So Schumacher was kind enough to sponsor this session, but they are doing things a little bit differently. And although they have sponsored the session, and we're very grateful to them for sponsoring the session, they were unable to attend. And so we don't have to listen to the 10-minute commercial. So we're going to move on. But if anybody's interested in Schumacher, they have a great EV charging solution for those of you who are including EV charging as part of your offerings. With that, we're going to talk a little bit about the concepts behind solar and power first, and then we're going to talk a little bit about water and mitigation. All right, so with that, let's talk a little bit. I just want to set a level playing field for everybody to understand some of the terms that we're going to use when we're talking about power and water. So very simply, the anatomy of the office. So we've got on energy, we have solar panels and battery and EV chargers and transfer switches and inverters. And then, of course, you have the financial side as well, right, which are rebates and incentives. And then depending on your AHJ, authority having jurisdiction, for those of you who are never had to work in zoning, there are certain requirements. So depending on where you're located, there may be requirements for you to put various systems in your homes. Aaron, maybe you want to give us just the briefest of overview. Give us the components, solar panels versus battery versus EV transfer?
All right, so the panels obviously are on the roof, gathering sunlight and turning that into energy. That energy is going to travel from the solar panel, usually one string that goes down somewhere, to the inverter. And the inverter is often integrated with that transfer switch, an automatic transfer switch. So the inverter is the intelligence often that's understanding the grid power is down and we're switching to battery safely and then switching back to grid if it's automated and or programmed in that way. And so the solar panels, the transfer switch, and the inverter really all are a team. The, let's see, what am I missing? EV charger obviously just ties in.
You're all good, yes, EV charger.
And then batteries obviously are also attached to either the transfer switch inverter combo or one of the other. And excess energy from the solar array can be redirected to store energy for moments when there is no grid power. You got a bank of stored energy you can use. Often you can start using that battery daily, which is usually recommended. One, you want to drive down the charge. And two, you want to offset any peak kilowatt hour payment times for that customer and lower their bill.
So it's an interesting notion. What most people don't recognize right off is that the power that is derived from a solar panel is actually DC current.
Sure.
Not AC current. And so the reason why we have an inverter built into here is because we have to invert or swap between DC and AC. And then the batteries store it via DC, right? So again, any of the power coming out of the battery has to then be transferred over to AC. So there's a bit of complexity here, but obviously having a good partner, having somebody who can come and install the system for you and maintain it for you, eliminates all of those kinds of questions. So when you look at this as a builder, talk a little bit about things like placement and understanding of the various rules and regulations of how much battery versus how much amperage versus how much storage versus when do I switch, when do I not? How does a builder allow for the amount of space that I need for this equipment when I'm doing my design?
Well, I actually had the opportunity. I worked for a company 20 years ago, and their claim to fame, they were a high energy efficient builder, and we put on solar panels on all of our houses. We did solar water heaters, all of that type of thing. And I actually worked in the design department back then, and actually we would design our subdivisions to take advantage of the sun, and I would design solar panel grid layouts on the roof, and thinking about the trees that are around you, the shade, how much time you can, how much energy you can capture, and for how much you need of your house. And it's a formula. You can, and these guys will help you with that. Okay, you put your panels on this roof or this side of the roof or that side of the roof, wherever, to take advantage of the sunlight. And then it's all formula based. So how much power is this? Do you want to run your whole house? Do you want to run certain things in that, so that makes up what you have to, I need this much battery storage to last, 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever, that while my power's down. If you're looking at it as an emergency backup, of course, all the time you're gaining solar, you're taking advantage of that and saving money on your energy bill, or even making money, like we saw on the slide at the keynote, the $150. Now that, you're not gonna make $150 a day every day. But think about it, if you made $5 a day every day for 365 days a year, that's a lot of money, right? So, the advantages and the biggest thing you have to overcome is the preconception that it costs too much, there's no return on investment, right? So once you get over that hurdle and you start explaining and you get into exactly, because most states, even little Arkansas, we have great rebate programs for solar. And even our energy companies will give good rebates. So once you get into it and you start seeing, as a high volume builder, and you guys are high volume, it's all about the bottom line, right? So does this make sense for me? Can I get a return on the investment? Can I make something off of it? And I was telling them before we started, I go through my neighborhoods now, and the secondary solar market is killing it in my neighborhoods. I'm seeing at least 3 in 10 of my houses are getting solar on them. So we started thinking, how do we take advantage of that? Can we get, a piece of that pie? So that's, working with Nomo or whoever, they can help you understand that, and working with Savant or any of their competitors with the battery and all of that type of stuff, the storage, the smart breakers. How does that make you more money? And that's what, I don't know, a lot of you are probably in purchasing. How many purchasing and estimating guys do we have in here?
A couple, three.
Or owners, you're concerned about the bottom line. So how do we get that return on investment? It's not just, if it was common sense, everybody would do it, right? But it's not, it should be, but, how do we get ourselves to that point? And sorry to ramble on.
No, you're doing just fine. So Ann, why don't you help us out with that? I know that Nomo has some programs to streamline some of these processes. Obviously, I don't want to just turn this into a commercial, but if you could help understand what the financial model tends to look like when a builder is looking at these various products to be able to put in their home, whether it's a standard or an option, how does that sort of formulate together, and what do those processes look like?
Sure. Well, I'll answer that by saying we've spoken with a number of different builders, and most that we have spoken to are not very excited about installing solar and EV and battery themselves. And we get that. There's a lot of upfront cost to that. There are a lot of concerns about the warranties, although I think between the two of us, we could help you two feel better that you are not responsible for the warranty.
Right.
So hopefully we can debunk some of those myths. But that said, we do think that there's an incredible opportunity to both differentiate the homes that you are building and really get good marketing credit for ensuring that your homes are ready to support these newer energy saving or water saving services that consumers are going to be looking for. So what does that look like? It's about $600, I'm just speaking to the power side, not water right now, but it's about $600 worth of equipment that needs to be put into the home to ensure that it is solar, EV, and battery ready. And then in addition, one of the things that seems small, but it makes a big difference that we're encouraging builders to consider is in your designs, make that garage just a little bit wider. If you make it even just a couple of inches wider, you've made it such that the consumer can so much more easily get an EV charger in there, that there's space for the battery in there. So even if you're not putting it in, again, you're able to market to the consumer that this home is ready in every sense. It's ready to take those new services on. So that's a little bit sort of at a high level of what it would look like, what it would take.
Sure.
Can I give a quick example?
Yeah, please.
On EV chargers, the first thing we started, everybody's talking about, we got to have an EV charger. All the electric cars are coming. How do we get ready for that? Well, the first knee-jerk reaction was up our service, right? I mean, you heard that. We got to up our services in our new subdivisions. We got to go to 300 amp services. Well, luckily I'd been coming to TecHome, so I'd met with Span and with these guys, and hey, there's a smart power panel that can take that load and shift it to the right time, so you're not overloading your service, and it's not going to run they want you to design for if everything's turned on at once. Well, how many times do you turn on everything in your house at once? And with a smart panel, you can take care of that and overcome that, how much does it cost to go from a 200 amp to 300 amp? For us, just on the land development side, it's $3,000 to $5,000 per lot. So if you can, and he can tell you how much he can do it for a lot less than that. So.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is the startup issue that you just mentioned is like almost entirely related to the locked rotor amps used on HVAC machines.
Yep.
That immediate ask of energy is way more than it's going to use once it's running, kind of like a generator. But a lot of systems struggle with that big burst of current that's being asked for immediately. Of course, if the power goes out, everything in the house turns on, right? And so that has been the historical challenge in fine-tuning these systems from any vendor in making that transition from grid to batteries and as smooth as possible. So heat pumps, although not in every market work, but heat pumps are a great way to lower that immediate draw ask of the house to a battery and storage solution so that you're not necessarily running into that challenge.
Right, because obviously a heat pump doesn't have that surge ask when there's
no
compressor,
spinning amp
There's
in
no
there.
spinning amp in there to grab that. And it's an important consideration. So when we're talking about smart power, obviously, it's not just about the elements that are up there on the screen, but it's about the other things that you're putting in the house as well, like a heat pump or an electric stove or any of the other
Yeah.
pool heater, exactly. And so it's part of an overall design that you have to be aware of as you design the electrical system for your homes. You know, it used to be fairly straightforward, right? Your electrician, you'd give him the plan, he'd put the outlets, you know, where the AHJ wanted them, and he'd, you know, put in a couple of 220s and, you know, one for the dryer and one for the oven, and you'd essentially be off to the races. There's a lot more considerations now about it. And then the other problem is when these devices do come online and there's all of this switching going on, this also produces dirty power. And so now you have sensitive electronics that are sitting on the grid of the home, if you will, that are subjugated to this dirty power, which they don't like either. And then you get into whole home surge suppression, as well as cleaner outlets and outlets that'll actually clean up the power for you before it gets to your devices. So a lot of my high-end brethren, for instance, are doing this with power management and power cleaning systems before they will power things like expensive home theaters or things along those lines. Certainly as an option at this level, right? When we're talking about high volume builders, I don't think that there's an opportunity maybe in some very exclusive neighborhoods where you would want to do this as a standard. But as an option, a lot of your home buyers will be coming to you concerned about these kinds of electrical issues because they've maybe experienced things in older homes where their equipment was burned out or their equipment was damaged based on the way that it was plugged in or the other devices that were plugged in around it. It also goes back to the isolation of individual circuits. So Aaron, I know you guys have a smart panel, for instance, so you can actually break out more of the break out more outlets, or fewer outlets, I should say, per breaker, right? So I can decide where I want to place my backup and where I want to sort of move the power around, right?
Yeah, you know, what we, being an automation company, are really nerdy about automation. And so, you know, if you've heard me say this week, sorry, our founder built a property about 15 years ago and put 45 kilowatt of solar on the property. And the first time the grid went down on Cape Cod, this very brilliant engineer was like, wait a minute, why don't I have power? And that sent this very brilliant person I'm lucky to work for to start getting geeky about why. And you know, there weren't automatic transfer switches at that point that were viable. There was a differential that the utility was worried about when it came back online. Will there be a transformer that blows and starts a fire, et cetera? So what we've done is create a modular approach to turning any breaker in a panel into a smart breaker. Mm-hmm. So we're not replacing the thermocoupled breaker itself. We're adding a smart device that's run in series with the breaker. And on average, you know, we know that something like 85% of the loads in an American electrical panel are 15 to 20 amp. And there's only one or two 30 amp, maybe a 60 amp, although with EV charging, we're seeing more of that. And so on average, our product at retail is about $60 per load. At you know, cost, there's, you know, obviously benefits when you're buying at volume, but we believe we've hit an MSRP that makes this attractive. And you know, from our perspective, this is one of the things we think every builder should do, whether it's our product or other brands they've mentioned. We'll fight for your business, but we think that step forward in the house coming with an intelligent electrical panel that's tied into the main, one, it allows you to say it's a smart home, it's prepared for this. There's some product you want to do for PV and all those other things. But you know, again, if you've heard me say this, I'm sorry. The Prius effect is real in this category, and if you don't know about this, Google it. There was a study done about 10 years after the Prius was released on drivers coming from combustion engines to this new hybrid, and how does their behavior change, and what was the impact? The result of the study was they were able to, you know, prove that as the driver was seeing the performance of the battery, and you know, in the Prius, when you hit that fun zone, I guess it turns green and there's leaves and fun. Drivers over the first year changed their behavior, and when surveyed, they responded, it was because I knew that when I floored it at a light, I was just wasting battery, and so I didn't do that anymore, et cetera, et cetera. We've had customers just make the panel smart. One in particular realized within the first 3 weeks of living in this new home that his pool pump was 30% of his draw, and he just changed the schedule. Right. If he didn't know that, that pool pump would have just kept working and kept taking up a big part of his bill, and he'd be yelling at the children or trying to figure out who's leaving TVs on or whatever it is. But it turned out that it was the initial schedule the pool contractor left in place that was just driving up the customer's bill for those first 3 weeks. He found that out in just a little bit of deep diving into the GUI, and then made a behavioral change. So to us, that's the best thing a builder can do is tell the customer day one, what is the energy in your house? Where is it being consumed? Because eventually they're going to change their personal behavior around it.
And the proof of the pudding that smart panels really are coming into their own is there's 3 different companies here at this small show showing off smart panels. And so you've got Eaton, Span, and Savant all showing off smart panels here. And so that's, to me, that shows you how important it is in the marketplace that all of the major electrical production companies, because Leviton has one too, but they're not here, so we're not allowed to talk about them, have in fact brought out smart, intelligent distribution systems. And if you're not putting in one of these systems, you should certainly be offering it as an option. There are very few homeowners these days who are not going to be somewhat educated about the idea of distributed or smart power, mostly because of the battery backup and things like that, and they know where they want to be able to back things up. For instance, this gentleman with the pool pump, I'm sure he's not putting that pool pump through his battery backup. Well, maybe he.
Well, he didn't have one to begin with.
Okay, there you go.
But decided the battery was a good way to go.
It was a good way to go after
for a little while.
So, and yes, the Prius effect is very real. If you've ever been behind one at a red light, you know what I'm talking about. They're watching that scope and they're not watching the light. So, but all of that being said, as we delve more into the smart power and the EV charging, the idea then becomes, if I do end up with a 60 amp quick charger plugged in, but I only have 200 amp service because I'm actually astounded that it costs $3,000 to $5,000 to go from 200 to 300.
Yeah.
That's land development cost, which is considerable when you've got a community of 100 homes even.
Yeah.
So how do you handle the idea of, okay, but I'm gonna come home and plug in my brand new EV 60 amp charger. Do the lights in the house dim, or or are things balanced for me? How's that all work out? No, we're all looking at you, Mr. Builder.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course it wouldn't. I mean, if you're going to come on, you got the oven, you come home, you plug that in. Your spouse is cooking dinner, the oven's on. If you have an electric oven that's on, the dryer may be running. Oh, wait a minute, the lights flicker. But with these smart panels, it says, okay, ship this here, turn off the, do this, so that doesn't happen, and you don't even notice it.
Right.
So.
Well, because I would imagine in northwestern Arkansas, you guys haven't outlawed natural gas yet.
No.
No, okay. So you see
Still pretty cheap.
Still pretty cheap, right. For those of you, I hear the little giggles going on because yes, there are places already that have outlawed natural gas. And so cooking dinner does involve electricity, as they say, and not natural gas anymore. And so it is important to understand the balance. And again, that's all about where you're located and what type of buyer you have. And then there are cultural differences. One of the problems that I ran into with a couple of my builder clients was they had specific cultures that were buying their homes that would cook different types of food and were very used to cooking that food over gas. And so when they would go to sell their home, they realized that they were cutting out an entire sector of the population because that sector of the population didn't understand that an induction oven, for instance, can cook as efficiently as a natural gas stove. And so there was an education process involved in that. But the introduction of an induction cooktop obviously puts more demand on the electrical grid, right? And so if I don't have natural gas necessarily as a backup, I then have to deal with it in other ways. And so there's lots of different decisions that go into how that smart power and how those balances go together. So let's shift gears just for a moment. We're going to talk a little bit about water for a second and the reason why water is important. Obviously, like electricity, water is a finite resource. It is a resource that your homeowners have to pay for each and every month. And there are a number of different elements that obviously they are interested in when it comes to water. I wrote this slide, and I put them in the order of which I felt there was the most importance. Obviously, the wastewater being the most effective, and we're going to talk a little bit more about wastewater as we go. But obviously, sinks and washers and dishwashers and water heaters, pool pumps and garden bibs are all point sources of use of water within the house. And then, of course, you have basement sumps, because water is not just about the water that you're bringing into your home that you want in your home. Unfortunately, water is also the water that comes into your home that you didn't necessarily want in your home. And that's where things like basement sumps and drainage come into play. Because like we mentioned at the beginning of this, the number one occurrence of insurance issue in the homes is water. Not the number one value, but the number of occurrences. More water occurrences happen within homes than fire occurrences, thank goodness, because we now have electrical grids that are much more stable. National average says that 72% of homeowners during a 15-year span will have water damage in their homes. That's a pretty significant number, and that's right out of the insurance associations. That's insurance numbers. We've worked with a number of them to help mitigate this. It's amazing that water mitigation is not mandated, excuse me, not mandated by either the insurance companies or by the local jurisdictions, when it does produce literally millions and millions of dollars a year in damage. And that's not just from floods, that's also from leaks and things like that. Not to mention the water that we waste. You've all experienced you're laying in bed late at night and you hear off in the distance the psh, right, which is that toilet valve leaking just slowly enough that every once in a while it has to refill that tank, right? We've all been there. But there are new sensors and things and new opportunities that will be able to mitigate a lot of that. But when we're talking about water, we're also talking about intelligence in equipment, and we're talking about intelligence in filtration. And something new is gray water recycling. There are some brand new products in the market that are already shipping and that will be shipping in the very near future that will actually recirculate and clean the gray water within your own home, so that the almost 30% of the water that would normally go down the drain will be recycled and cleaned right in your own home and then reused. The picture that you see here on the screen, right? Okay, good, is a product called RainStick. RainStick is one of the shower systems that actually recirculates the gray water. It gets integrated into the drain. It takes a certain percentage of the water, reuses the heat from that water, and also cleans that water. So 30% of the water that you're then showering with is actually water that has come from your own drain. It's a really cool system. It saves an immense amount of water, and it's also something that is very important to home buyers and to homeowners because it is going to lower the costs overall for the lifetime of that home. And so smart water is now coming into play. So you've got things like valve systems and sensors. They all get integrated in together. And then when you're dealing with battery backup, water thankfully doesn't take up the battery backup, right? So power and water in this particular case are separate, other than things like sump pumps. And that brings me back to the power conversation, because when the power is out, it usually means that we're having a storm. And when we're having a storm, what tends to happen? The basements tend to need mitigation, in which case then it's just as important to integrate your pumping solution, your mitigation solution, with your power solution. Do you do basements in Northwest Arkansas?
Not a lot because of the rocky country.
Rocky country.
We have some walkout basements, but not a lot of, we don't do true basements. So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So going back to the standards and the options and things that get offered as part of the various solutions of the builders. So Ann, I'm going to look to you just for a moment. If you could give us an idea, if solar is not a standard within the home, what types of packages do you see are the most popular? Are they whole home? Are they doing just some small amount? And how do you see, what's the sort of the financial package? You talked about $600 for a small amount of equipment. What is the overall impact though if I'm a home builder and I need to put up the half a roof worth of solar panel? What kind of financial impact am I looking at? And maybe you can speak to a little bit of the rebates, 45L, things like that?
Yeah.
Sure.
So a lot to unpack there, but I'll try and touch on a couple of those for sure. So one thing to note is that the technology within the solar panels themselves has improved so dramatically over the last decade. You know, it's very easy to think that it's the same as it was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when there were a lot of leakage problems, things would break, things were incredibly expensive. And it's not to say that this is a cheap product now. It is not. But the costs have come down significantly. And it's also important to note that for your purchaser, even if you are not the one installing solar, for your purchaser, two things are key to know right now. One, while yes, the current interest rate environment means that there's not a lot in the way of loans happening right now, but there are a tremendous and increasing number of lease and TPO options available for consumers. So we really have not seen nearly as dramatic a drop-off in solar demand as one might think if you were following the stock prices of many of the solar companies right now. They don't look good because there is an assumption that the interest rate environment has had a dramatically poor impact on the space. It really has not. It's just shifted the economics such that we're not seeing nearly as much in the way of traditional loans. We're seeing a lot more in the way of still cash purchasing, actually, but a lot more in the way of lease and TPO options, which for many consumers is great. Third-party ownership.
Third-party ownership.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's just installed and serviced and maintained by a third party, and the consumer's just paying, the homeowner's just paying a flat fee per month, either for the equipment or to be able to purchase the solar back or the energy back. So the other thing that you mentioned is that from now until 2030, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is providing significant tax credits and rebates for a variety of energy-saving services, solar being one of them. So right now, nationwide, there is a 30% federal tax credit available for the installation of solar. And I'll let you speak. I know there's several on the power side as well. That is significant, and anyone can get access to that. So a great thing, again, for you to be able to market to consumers is if you are making sure that the homes that you're building are ready to support these services, you've got the opportunity to say to the consumer, look, you can easily qualify for this 30% tax credit, which a lot of consumers still are not aware of. So that's a great benefit to them. The other thing that I would say, and this is a little bit of a departure from your question, but to the point about, so how do you make money in this? I think two things that I would highlight quickly before. I definitely want to make sure that we touch on some of the other ways that consumers can access some of the rebates and tax credits. But one is we have had some success with builders, to your point earlier about the secondary market, saying, look, most of you have built a lot of homes over the last decade or so, right? How about if we go back to your prior purchasers and offer them solar, EV, or battery solutions? What you become then is a lead generator to a company like me, and you get paid very good money for any installations that happen from generating those leads. What you're also doing is putting your brand back in front of those consumers, reminding them that you are the person who built the home that they love right now. And you're really saying to them that we care about your long-term experience in your home, and we want it to be as efficient and as safe and as comfortable for you as possible. So there's a lot of brand equity that you can gain by doing that, and really pretty incredibly low effort. In many cases you're talking about sending an email or sending a mailer just to do an introduction to try and drive that lead. So that's a place to really think about potentially driving some new profit for you, because that's really straight to the bottom line.
And based on what Tim Costello was telling us the other night, the reseller market is very suppressed right now. Everybody is staying in their homes, and so this is an opportunity to go back to them.
Yep.
Hey, you're going to stick around a little while? We have an opportunity for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say any house that they've done with a generator should be their first target.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing, there's a lot of customers with generators that like the resiliency, but are incredibly frustrated when they realize, hey, these are the only 4 things we're going to be able to power when the grid is out.
Yep.
And those are the first customers that will respond typically to a solar investment, will respond to a battery or a smart panel that gives them the choice now. Mm-hmm. So there's also some savings there because you don't need the sub panel for the generator anymore on a new build. On an old build, you get to remove it entirely and or just integrate it as if it's part of the main. So I will say the 30% discount is also available for solar, battery, EV charger. There's a $1,000 credit. and any panel that you make or upgrade, there's a 30% discount. So then there's
Your utilities will give you back rebates on them.
the utility side as well. And then for if you're updating appliances, maybe you didn't put in Energy Star appliances 10 years ago, but all of your new homes get it. Going back to those customers with Energy Star and being the conduit for that offering, there's a $10,750 total credit you can get depending on your spend.
Wow.
Just for putting in more efficient appliances. So, the Inflation Reduction Act is the most aggressive climate action our government has ever taken. Like all bills, it's a ton of different programs written by different House members and senators, but all targeted at this space, both for the builder side, 45L, and for the consumer side, all trying to do what incentives are supposed to do: stoke new investment in a new space, seed new beneficial technology into the consumer base.
Yeah, and what's also important about that is if you are really, really bored some night and you want to read through all of the details of this act, right now, between now and 2030, it's very much of a carrot approach, which is great. Incentives for people to do what we'd call the right thing. That's going to shift, and you don't want to be behind that shift, because at some point you and your homeowners, therefore, are going to be paying a lot more money for not adopting these types of technologies. So 2030 seems like a long ways out, and it's really not.
And there is a stick. So Ann is absolutely right. The way that it reads right now is very much a carrot. There's a lot of money being pumped into the economy and pumped into builders and manufacturers and homeowners. But come 2030, there's a stick that comes behind that. So when not only is it the penalty of these rebates running out and you no longer having the opportunity to have these rebates, but then there are some punitive things in the future of if we're doing too little or we have not adopted enough, there are some punitive things that sort of kick in after 2030. And so it is actually in everybody's best interest to take advantage of all the free money, because once the free money is gone, they start to collect it back. It's a very weird.
And there's also market pressure.
And there's also market pressure
because time of use billing.
Yes.
While we have it in California, but
I was hoping to catch you in that. So time of use billing. For our California friends, those are dirty words.
Wow.
Because it's managed to almost destroy why I wanted solar, but now I have to put in the solar anyway.
Yeah, so what time of use is shortly, most utilities cannot produce the amount of energy they need during peak draw. So if we think about residents, that's going to be the morning, and then when we traditionally got home from work. So me personally in Los Angeles, 2 years ago, we started having to pay double the base kilowatt rate from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. And triple that rate from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. And so, that market pressure is there because, during the summer, I definitely had 4-figure bills.
Yep.
And
how large is your home?
It's small, it's 1,900 square feet, and it's 100 years old. And so that's basically the challenge. I know that doesn't necessarily apply to new build, but a lot of the American inventory was built 70, 80, 90 plus years ago. My house originally in 1932. And so there's plaster and metal lath, and they didn't put any insulation in, and they didn't think about any of these things. And so that market pressure applies to everybody, right? Because when your bill starts creeping up, you start, after you're done screaming or lighting it on fire and then going and looking at it online, you start to think about what can I do to change my behavior. My wife and I, we don't use our appliances until 10 p.m. We fill up the dishwasher and wait. We fill up the washing machine and maybe wait, just because that it adds up over the month.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
I'll go back to water too, because unlike California has hard water in a lot of places, and that's true in a lot of places, there are several water softening solutions that are completely powerless. They don't require any energy at all. Connecticut is the one that I ended up investing in, hashtag not being paid. But it was key to me to think about that.
Yes.
Like, it should not require power
to soften water,
to deliver us better water. And so that was driven by my higher bill, right? And of course,
anybody who's washed their hands this week knows what hard water is all about, right? How long it takes that soap to get washed off your hand here in Phoenix. And all I keep thinking about is the amount of water that we're wasting because we're just trying to get the soap off our hands. It's a whole other problem. And the reason why it's hard is because there's not enough of it to begin with. It's a vicious cycle. Anyway, so if we could go back just a step, because I have like one more minute and then I want to ask some questions. 45L, give us a real quick, so the 45L rebate program is integrated into the IRA, but obviously is a standalone as well because it's not just a tax credit, but it's actual cash incentive, right? So it's money that I fill out a grant form, if you will, submit my plans, and then there's real money. There's an actual check that gets cut by the federal government to say, thank you very much for installing these systems. Here's your rebate check. So I don't have to wait until April 15th to get it back. I can actually do it right then and there. So those systems, 45L is attributable to power, to water, to building materials. There's a whole host of Energy Star, as well as not LEED official, but LEED adjacent type buildings, so that if you follow certain of the LEED rules, those also apply to 45L. So it's important, and I'm getting good nods, so I know I'm on the right track here. Yes, sir.
Actually, I think it's more of a comment.
Nope, very valid point, and that I definitely missed. So the comment is, on the water element slide, two of the things that I missed were recirculated water, recirculated hot water, I'm assuming you're talking about, and then rain sensors, right, to mitigate watering your lawn or other elements based on what the weather is outside. So thank you. Those are two very good points. You had a...
Just to that point, yeah, that's what we put, in our, we're a higher end luxury builder, but, in all of our sprinkler systems, we have the rain sensors built in, and, it shuts the water off, it tells it, even it's smart enough to know, okay, it's 95 degrees with 85% humidity. I need to water this much, or I need to do this. So it's a very intelligent system. Those systems are out there. It costs a little bit more money, but we feel it's worth it. We've started putting, we didn't get to talk about this very much, but we do a water shutoff valve on the main, and then we're adding sensors. I would encourage you, what's your top warranty? I don't know about you, but most of our warranty damage is water, right? That we have in our claims, and whether it's Joe or a trim guy shooting a nail through a pipe, and then it rusts out 2 weeks after they move in. If imagine that happens right now, you don't have a shut off. What happens? If they're not home, especially the whole house floods, right? Well, if you've got that sensor on your, set on your water main, as soon as that detects that it's leaking, hey, nothing's on it, it shuts it off. So you save all, you're going to get a little water, but not as bad as, if that just sits there and runs. So,
exactly.
If you're doing washers and dryers on the second floor, I would encourage you put there's little sensors you can set right there in the pan with it, and it'll shut that water off instead of letting it flood your house.
Yeah.
So.
No, very valid point. So we hope that you found the experience to be valuable, and please refer your colleagues and peers for future sessions and for future opportunities at the TecHome Builders Summit. And thank you very much to our panel for all of their hard work and their expert experience. So thank you very much.